Is it recording? Okay. Guys, I just got back from working, from Pilates, from doing Pilates. I'm start kidding. I caught it. I'm just gonna show you. Not it! So it's been a hot minute, and ever since my Jojo video about part 3 blew up, I decided to go back and rewatch Phantom Blood via the recuts. A video about part 2 will be coming soon as well, so subscribe and ring the bell to not miss that. Originally, I didn't like part 1, and by a large margin preferred part 2 over Phantom Blood. So here today, I am going to re-review Phantom Blood and tackle the question, is Phantom Blood good in 2019, and if it aged well? So with that being said, this is Jojo's Bizarre Adventure, Phantom Blood. So for those uninitiated, Phantom Blood, or Part 1, is the first 9 episodes of Jojo's Bizarre Adventure. It covers the 1987 manga from Hirohiko Araki and is about 2 boys, Jonathan Joestar and Dio Brando. Jonathan Joestar is the rightful heir to the Joestar family, and when Dio Brando is adopted into the family, he instantaneously despises Jonathan and all he does, wishing to take his family fortune away from him and ruin his life. He obsesses over this, getting caught up in his hatred for Jonathan, and to finally usurp Jonathan, he uses an ancient Aztec stone mask, which turns him into an immortal vampire. But while this happens, Jojo goes on a very bizarre adventure to learn and grow, eventually hoping to become powerful enough to overcome the immortal Dio Brando and bring back peace to his once innocent life. Now, as we get more and more into this video, realize these are my opinions only, and in no way do I intend for them to be taken as a fact. You may like or dislike Phantom Blood, but these are opinions of my own, and in no way, shape, or form do they represent an example of what your opinions should be on Phantom Blood. With that being said, my initial viewing of Phantom Blood, well, I severely disliked it to a high degree, even stating in my first review, which links for are in the description, that I thought part 1 was only really watched because it's so bad it's good. Now I want to address this first because I disagree with my stance from that review. I think part 1 is so enjoyed because of its ridiculousness, but its ridiculousness does not make it bad. I think that the way Phantom Blood is paced with its steady decline into bizarro fantasy is the most enjoyable and satisfying aspect of Phantom Blood. As an example, when Jojo defeats Bruford, he is handed a sword named Luck, and with his dying breath uses blood to write a P before the L to name the sword Pluck. Now, I don't know about you, but that's freaking hilarious and a great example of how comedy is used to break the dark and dramatic tension that Phantom Blood has. Another example is how Speedwagon melts the ice on Zappley's frozen arm. But how does he do it, you may ask? With his freaking abs. That's right, Speedwagon confirms that if you have a 6-pack set of abs, hell, add 2 more, baby, if you got 8. That's right, 8! Or 6, I'm not actually discriminating, you can melt ice with them. And, I mean, if you can melt ice like that with your abs, well, you better damn well believe I'm cooking my eggs on them abs. Oh my god. Maybe I just inadvertently solved world hunger. I gotta tell somebody about this. I gotta get famous Twitch streamer and Jojo superfan Condifiction, aka Elusive Crawfish, on the phone. I gotta call him up. Oh, Condi's calling. Hello?
Hey, I didn't call to talk to you. Put your feet on the phone.
Feet on the phone? What do you mean?
I want to talk to your feet.
My feet can't talk, Condi. God damn it, Condi!
But I thought...
Condi?
Listen, man.
Put your feet on the fucking phone.
Condi, my feet... I told you the last time, my feet can't talk!
Listen, man, if you're not gonna put your feet on the phone, would you at least fucking send me some feet pics? Come on, I need something.
Well, I can at least do that.
Okay, thank you.
And speaking of segues, let's talk some more about Phantom Blood. Another aspect of this season I really enjoyed the second time around is the gorgeous art style and presentation of the show. Now, while I know there are criticisms of the character designs and their poses and all of that, I think it really adds to the experience of the show and makes it more memorable in a lot of ways. It's a quirk, and it's a quirk that more often than not works in their favor. Fights feel much more genuinely entertaining and more fun than even in the other two parts I've seen sometimes. It doesn't mean they're better per se, but I had a good time sitting down and really getting into the spectacle of the fights. And in my opinion, this highlights the best thing about Phantom Blood. It's quintessential Jojo stripped down to the bare. You can put that one in the quote books too, my friends. Some of it is really damn good and continues to be built upon in later sequels. And with the bad stuff, you can easily see Araki move away from it as he learned in a fairly quick fashion what worked for this series. You can see him adapt and grow even as Phantom Blood moves on. Sure, it's not a lot, as Phantom Blood is one of his early manga, but what you can see is a man really trying things out to see how his style develops and where the story would take him. The biggest example, of course, is the eventual descent into this wild and bizarro journey. In the beginning, it's a very basic setup, but as it evolves, you can see Araki come into his own with the entertaining fights and storytelling. It's fascinating and unique, and to see Araki set the standards of a genre while experimenting himself, well, it's very commendable, and in some ways, it's kind of inspiring. Though I do want to delve more into the characters and what I really liked about them, which will, of course, contain spoilers. Now, I may have a lot of negative things to say about Phantom Blood, but there really is some great storytelling and character building. So, let's dive into the last episode of Phantom Blood, which I think is the best episode of Phantom Blood, coincidentally. The gang are on a ship, and, well, it's now beyond repair, and Dio had just failed at trying to take over Jonathan's body, so with Jonathan in his dying moments, is attacked by Dio one more time, and so he pushes Erina out of the way and grabs Dio and holds him close as he dies. This moment was absolutely beautiful and really comes out of nowhere. The show at every moment before this is in your face and full of action. Jonathan is pretty much by this point the hero he was destined to always be and is very powerful. And out of nowhere, Jonathan is just mortally wounded, and I don't know what you guys think about this, but that took me by surprise. I even came upon an excerpt from one of Araki's books where he talks about his decision to kill Jonathan. Basically, he said that this was the right thing to do, as for one, he wanted to move on to Joseph Joestar, but he also felt that while a hero dying at the end of the shonen was a no-no, he thought it was necessary for what he wanted to do and that he could make it work. I just thought this whole episode was profoundly interesting, and his decisions to kill Jonathan were as well, and I think it worked. Because while I did not like Jonathan, I did feel he went out with a proper send-off at the very least. And while there is questionable writing for Erina in this scene where she says one of the coolest lines, where she says basically that Erina dies with Jonathan there, but when she's told to live for a child by Jonathan, she says this is just like one of those nursery books. Like, come on, dude, that's ridiculous. But either way, the writing at the very end of this series just really worked in most places. But there are severe issues with Phantom Blood that limit its enjoyment to a large but also a kind of subjective degree, and the first issue is simply the pacing. And this is something that in my part 3 video I got a lot of comments about. And its issues vary, but mainly it's sluggish. And if I were to hazard a guess, it is because of Araki experimenting and such. By the way, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing his name right, so I apologize. I can't say it's exactly a fulfilling experience to see Jonathan go from a kid to an adult who tries to defeat Dio. At the end, I didn't feel good about this journey I was on. I felt relief that it was finally over and that I could move on. And while there is a great deal to like about Phantom Blood, I can't help but feel its pacing is what ultimately makes it near unwatchable in certain places, and that's even in the recuts. And it got me thinking about this and inspired this video itself. Is Phantom Blood outdated? Is it even good or something you should watch in the year 2019? And I want you guys to give your thoughts on this in the comments below as well, but I don't think this is the simple cut and dry Phantom Blood is bad. I think it's simply just outdated. And let me tell you why I think that. So, Phantom Blood came out in 1987. 2 years before Berserk, and was competing against legendary series like, the original Dragon Ball, Saint Seiya, and Fist of the North Star. Insane juggernauts even back then, and as well extremely influential in their own right. So here comes Phantom Blood, and while it is very popular, its criticisms even back then, it eventually is recognized for how influential and groundbreaking it eventually was. So, some 30 odd years later, viewing it in anime form, I can't help but feel there are better versions of this anime out right now. And even one of those is Phantom Blood's sequel, Battle Tendency and Stardust Crusaders, which I have gotten comments on my Stardust Crusaders video where many people actually say it is the worst part of Jojo, and at least for now, I'm gonna have to disagree with that statement. You see, Stardust Crusaders is everything I think Phantom Blood should have been, and has an arguably better use of Dio Brando, a better main character in Jotaro, which, with just as entertaining side characters, and one of the issues in Phantom Blood, of course, is that the side characters don't mean as much. Well, in Stardust Crusaders, they get their own spotlight in the story from time to time, and in general, I feel the pacing is so much quicker and way more punctual than it is in Phantom Blood. Phantom Blood feels like every other shonen, but a little more plotting, although I do think it takes more risks in terms of its overall presentation and style because of, Araki experimenting to see what sticks here. I think ultimately, at the end of the day, it isn't doing enough to be what its sequels eventually came to be, which is what we know Jojo as now. I've seen the same theme of this show a million times already. The hero's journey, leaving to grow and fight to eventually come back to take down the big bad. While that trope and story isn't inherently bad, or there's nothing really wrong with it, it doesn't do enough to spice up that trope and make it compelling and new. And a lot of people actually agree with me on this as well, as the main criticisms of Phantom Blood are that it's very sluggish, poorly written in certain areas, and too tonally dark. And some people even say that it's better to just start out with Battle Tendency instead. And I can't help but to agree with all of those criticisms, because what's the point of watching Phantom Blood when you get the better experience with Battle Tendency, where, by the way, you are essentially more rewarded to skip it, as Stardust Crusaders, which comes after Battle Tendency, is a much better attempt, in my opinion, at what Phantom Blood is trying to be. But before you say it in the comments section, I also 100% agree and understand why you shouldn't skip Phantom Blood. I mean, it's an integral part of the experience. For example, I am a huge fan of Dragon Ball Z, and I would be pretty adamant on starting with the original Dragon Ball if someone was asking me how to truly get into the show. And that's because I'm in the 1% of crazy, hyper-fanatical Dragon Ball Z fans, so I absolutely understand why people say don't skip Phantom Blood, and the legitimate reasons as to why people enjoy it. I am right there with you when it comes to those of you who are watching and saying that you shouldn't skip Phantom Blood, but at the same time, my opinion on this will remain unchanged, at least for the time being. I just don't see why anyone who seriously wants to get into JoJo would watch this first. For some people, it could turn them off the show completely, and for some, to be fair, it also could be their favorite. I think it depends at the end of the day on who you are trying to convince to get into JoJo and how you want to introduce them and what are the best places to introduce a person that is more suitable to their tastes. But that's just my 2 cents. While I have a newfound appreciation for Phantom Blood and what it is trying to achieve, it's simply too outdated in 2019. There are far better options than trying to use this as a gateway to get into JoJo. I think a better way to start would easily be Battle Tendency and even Stardust Crusaders, which I know is an extremely unpopular opinion as you lose an incredible amount of story from Battle Tendency, but not enough where you couldn't catch on after a couple episodes, and of course you can just go back and watch if it's not gelling well for you anyways. I know, because when I started Stardust Crusaders, I only remembered maybe a couple things about Part 1 and Part 2 at best. So Phantom Blood isn't bad. It's certainly even an anime I wouldn't even say is good either, but it's an above average anime. That's just my opinion. I know a lot of people will disagree, and that's a very unpopular thing to say. And I think in 2019, the only way you're watching this and enjoying it is if you just so happen to, well, for one, enjoy it, which is possible. I mean, hey, people have a lot of different opinions, but really, if you're more interested in seeing how Araki started out in terms of writing and how this series by the end becomes more and more of what we all love about JoJo, then in that instance, I would say Phantom Blood is definitely for you. Click on the subscribe button if you're new, like the video, and if you got $1 to spare me, support me on Patreon to gain access to exclusive content and perks like Discord server roles and the satisfaction of supporting me, your favorite YouTuber dude. Bye-bye.